Hi, today what I'm going to do is cook a vegetarian meatball. I'm going to make a nice rich tomato sauce and just make a kind of something quite interesting out of it. And the bases I'm going to use are lentils, I'm going to use chickpeas, onions, I'm going to bind that together with some carrots, and I'm going to use an egg in that just to act as a binder. Very simple little recipe. Down with the tomato sauce, I'll just go to that in a second. But to make my my meatball first, or let's call it a vegetable ball, I'm going to add my lentils into a bowl. Now with the lentils, I've soaked them, they're raw, but I've soaked them overnight. So these are green poi lentil that I'm using. Actually, lentils, they're a very interesting ingredient in themselves, and it's probably worth just delving on them just for a moment, because very high in magnesium, very high in zinc, very high in quite a number of minerals. They're a great fiber source, and that's in particular with soluble fibers as well, and insoluble fiber. And they contain many vitamins as well. They're very, very high in protein. So when you're cooking a dish like this, bringing chickpeas and lentils, things like this into a dish, it's a great way of getting that good quality plant-based protein into the dish. So lentils are superb for heart health. They're superb for an anti-inflammatory diet, and they're one of those key ingredients that we should be trying to use as much as we can, and a great alternative to animal-based proteins. So anyhow, I'm just going to keep going with this now. So my lentils, which have just been soaked into my pot, I've just used a tin of picked chickpeas. I've drained them off, and again, the tin of chickpeas into the pot. My onions, recipe has 3 medium onions. I'm using half of my onions into this. I'm using about half of my garlic. Now to season, I'm just going to use a little bit of thyme. I'm going to use my other spices down with the sauce itself, and that'll bring the texture into it. I'm going to give a pinch of salt. I tend to favour a potassium salt. And pepper. Now you could use your liquidizer. I'm just going to use a hand blender. I'm just going to blend these ingredients together. My lead doesn't quite fit. There we go. So as you're blending this together, you'll get quite a mealy texture. And then when it's blended together, that part of the ingredients, I'm now going to add my egg into the mixture. Just mix that through. That'll help bind. And finally, my grated carrots. I'm just going to mix those all through this bean mixture. Until that's all bound together nicely. You see, because the lentils are raw, they're going to act as kind of a binding agent within themselves and help to hold these little balls together. So you'll end up with this lovely, nice, doughy kind of a meatball. Well, I'm just going to call it a meatball, but vegetable ball, let's say. I'm just going to have a little taste of that. Just make sure my seasoning is about right. Just a tad more salt needed. Maybe a pinch more pepper. And the thyme, I sometimes don't like to use multiple herbs and overcomplicating things like this. I like one distinctive flavour coming through good and well. You have your little garlic, so there's quite a lot of components here. And then let this sauce carry it. That way you have contrasting flavours and it makes for a much more interesting dish. Then what I'm going to do is just form up my balls, and just pop them onto a silica mat, as you might a meatball. And then what I'm going to do is, when I finish all of these, I'm going to bake them in the oven just till they're set. I'm going to bake them at about 160, 170 degrees until they just start to set. And then I'm going to take them out, and then I'm going to make my sauce in the meantime, and then pop them into the sauce and finish the dish. So I'm going to get on with that. First, before I start cooking my sauce, that's my vegetable balls just already on a silica mat. And again, I'm just going to pop those into the oven, 170 degrees until they set. For my sauce, what I'm going to do is put about a generous tablespoon of olive oil into a heavy casserole or a heavy pot, and have a nice tight fitting lid as well. And straight away, I'm just going to add my onions, my red pepper, and my garlic. What I'm going to just do now with that is just cover it up. Oh, and I'm just going to add a pinch of salt. And some black pepper. Now, I'm just going to cover that up and allow it to cook for about 5 minutes, keeping an eye on it as it cooks. After 4 to 5 minutes, your onions, peppers and garlic are just taking on a little bit of colour there and just cooking nicely. I'm now going to add into this my cayenne pepper, just to give it a little spice, my mixed herbs, and tomato paste. I'm also going to add my tomato passata. And then with my passata, I'm just going to rinse this out with a little bit of water just to get a little bit more liquid into the dish. So just a little bit of water just to rinse out and get all the passata. And that's my tomato sauce well underway. Also to this, I'm just going to add a little bit of olive oil, about 2 tablespoons, just to enrich the sauce a little bit. And that is the bones of the sauce really. I'm just going to let that come to a nice simmer and then just turn that off. And here's my little vegetable balls, meatballs, just out of the oven. And as you can see, they're after setting up nicely. And what I'm going to do to finish those is I'm going to take a nice appropriate little bowl, because I'll be popping these back in the oven just to let the whole dish kind of infuse back in together. And using a slice, I'm just going to add, as you might with a normal meatball type dish, add these little fritter type balls into oven suitable casserole just before I sauce that all up. So I'm just going to add some of the little balls in there, and then I'm going to add a little bit of sauce on. The sauce that I had made earlier, obviously. And then add the remainder to form this kind of a nice little kind of a meatball-y kind of idea. There we go. And then just going to sauce the rest of the dish. And then when all my sauce is in place, now you could put a little sprinkling of a nice cheese on top of this. I'm not going to do this time. I'm just going to give a drizzle of olive oil. And I'm going to just then pop that back into the oven just for a few minutes, just to allow the dish infuse together, about 5-7 minutes. Having allowed that just infuse in the oven just for a few minutes, there we have it. Our little kind of a meatball dish. I just have a few little sprigs of parsley here. And I had very, very little, so I didn't even bother with the recipe. But I'm just going to pop those on top, just to put a little bit of green. A last little drizzle of olive oil. And that's it. Ready to serve. a little serving spoon, and allow people to enjoy themselves, maybe with a nice light salad.